Hey guys, I'm here today to discuss one of my all-time favorite directors, Sergio Leone. He's the absolute king and marvel of the spaghetti western genre, as he's made some of the greatest films of it of all time. He was entertaining, fascinating, and just very unique depths of dialogue-driven films, just extremely atmospheric directing throughout his entire filmography. Very deep layered characters and stories that are just really engaging and fascinating, just about the entire way through. And I would say three films in particular he's made are perhaps some of the most grand epics of all time. They're right up there with Coppola's '70s run. Some of the biggest films that just feel like there's something of a cinematic haven. And I feel like the way that his films kind of collide with Ennio Morricone's music, it's like bread and butter. And this makes for some of the greatest cinema I've ever seen in my life. So we'll start with the year 1964, A Fistful of Dollars. And this is the first of the Man with No Name trilogy, which is, hey, it's an incredible trilogy all around, but truthfully, the third film is about a million times better than the first two. This is still really good. And I'm really glad I saw this. Although it certainly is just a rehash of the material we've already covered in Yojimbo. Like, I really enjoyed watching this once, but I'd rather go to Yojimbo now, honestly. Although it's a really good film. It's amazing. A perfect foundation, though, so I still almost want to give it the full credit. Just, hey, this is really a perfectly made film. It only just gets like 100 times better. So, it's not a big deal. It's still entertaining. It's on TV, like, absolutely. I would say it kind of reminds me of like watching something like Kill Bill Volume 1, like Quentin Tarantino. Of course, it just really presents the icon of Clint Eastwood. I think that's what makes all this really special in the end. It's very iconic. And I feel like Eastwood just identifies ultimate cool Americana cinema. And again, the soundtrack is really good here too. It would only get better. But yeah, I'm think everything's gonna be great at the epic. So I'll cover 1965 for a few dollars more, which is, I'd say probably the least famous of the trilogy. But this is a slightly better film than Fistful of Dollars. Although I feel like we're not quite at Good, the Bad, the Ugly. And it's certainly. Although I think what really elevates this is a very young Klaus Kinski, already a crazy madman before he was even any Werner Herzog. Leone had discovered him at a very young age here, so that's pretty special. And there's a lot of insanity kind of building up through this whole storyline. A lot of dark moments and a lot of powerful moments too. So it's building a little bit more of an emotional core to resonance. Although, like I said, I think it's still just kind of supposed to feel just like a little more plottiness, just how other films will flow, or you're just kind of going there more for the atmosphere. More than anything. So, let's get to that. 1966. So it was the first of the three Granddaddy epics. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And this is one of those films where it's like, if you've never seen this before, you might be asking yourself, how in the world do you make a film about just three goons two badasses and a goon looking for gold out in the desert? How do you do that? But I think what this film does such a great job is it just says it for you in the most pure way. This is an exploration of what it is to have the trifecta of the good, the bad, and the ugly, which I think is one of the greatest things I've ever seen in a story. Purely, this expresses pure cinematic cool and fun in the most pure way I've perhaps ever seen in my life. Pure and simple. I think about Will I Love You More than Pulp Fiction these days, as much as that's an equally perfect film of the '90s. I think this is like the '60s expression of it. And I actually love this the most. I mean, because this comes down to the characters, really, and just how good all three of them are. So, and like, they're all three symbolize like a sense of morality within the nature of good, bad, and ugly. And you would think that based on the title, that this would be like one of those like very black and white, almost just too campy kind of films, but there's zero camp value about it. Although everything about it should, because it's extremely stylized, but it's equally substantial the entire way. And the entire stuff is like soundtrack gives you the grace and elegance that's so epic and grand. While the screenplay just moves things along in such an entertaining, natural way where it's intimacy with characters. It's literally just intimacy with these three people just amongst those epic backdrops and scenery and scope behind it all. So I think that's what Leone really does successfully. He just captures the most epic scope in the most entertaining, cinematic way possible. And he literally succeeds at it. I mean, and the morality tale here is just amazing. I really love Claudia's Ventura, particularly. I mean, Clint Eastwood. It's just this is one of the coolest characters of all time. And every moment he's in it, he's just the ultimate cool guy. You got Angel Eyes as the bad, ultimate force of evil right here. I mean, he is bad. Like, literally evil, man. And you got Tuco, who's like an ugly guy who, like, he can be likable most, but he's just kind of, he's kind of sleazy and just ugly dude, too, in a sense. And, and maybe there's not, and what's so perfect about all this is truly that the way it blurs the line. I mean, there's moments where the good isn't always good. There's moments where the bad is going to have, like, he has a sense of, like, nobility to him. So he has, like, a morality about him. While the ugly, he has, like, charming moments, but he, like, literally just blurs right in the line of, like, I like you, I kind of love you, but you are kind of an irritating dude. You know, my confession is I see equal basis of like, you have to see all three of these in a man. I think all three of these live in a person. So like the way it balances these shades out, and seeing that is just really, really perfect. So I really love how, again, like Lonnie does some things that are not the most heroic actions when it comes down to it. Like he literally will abandon, abandon another person whenever like he's in the face of danger. Like that's what happens when people are in the heat. I feel like they always act a little differently than you might initially expect, and I think that's what being in the heat really is. It's to see how you would act in the face of death. Really, to think that way is to kind of find and ground it in a sense. And I feel like this is like the ultimate villain right here. Because Angel Eyes, golly, yeah, he's absolutely evil, and everything he does is terrible. Although his, like I said, he's like a good worker, you could say. Like he has good work ethic, like amazing work ethic, and whether, and he's always gonna tell it like it is. So you kind of naturally are like, okay, I like this dude, in a lot of ways. And yeah, Tuco's just, yeah, I mean, hey, he's pretty ugly. Like he's irritating to be around for such a long time. So I think that like just taking in all of these complexities about the film are just what make it so natural. And it's one of those films where I'm not even, it's like it's like Pulp Fiction, where it just doesn't even feel like I'm thinking too hard, although it's like it's just taking you naturally through an epic in a way that it's like, wow, like that was like a life-affirming experience in its own kind of way, really. It's an all-time classic, one of the best of all time. All the characters are just so great in their interactions with each other. All the side characters you come along with the way. The grand soundtrack is just so good. All the acting is really perfect as far as like they all kind of give the characters just ultimate justice, and I feel like this is just elevated to extremely above status, just levels of cinematic joy. Really, like I come out of this with such joy, ultimately, of what we went through, but also pain and heartfelt, moments, because it does take you through a lot of like the burdens of, being a man and having to face depths of nihilism that you never wanted to go to, but you have to. It's almost like to be a man is to face that in a sense, but it's also kind of ridiculous too. That's the thing. There's like a sense of comedy movement over this whole film. Like it all feels like a satire and a celebration of masculinity at the same time, and I think that's about the greatest thing I've ever seen. Honestly, that's perfect. I mean, just to combine those two elements is about the coolest thing I've ever seen. Everything about this is so epic. The West is portrayed in the most epic way possible. This is like Italian landscape, but I mean, it really just feels like the most Western energy ever. It's all cool. I mean, it's just the way it all like just shows like, yeah, I mean, certain characters when they get like pissed off, I mean, like they'll just go crazy and like they get stupid. But it's like, but it makes sense why they're doing it too. Like it's an endless morality tale that just really adds up as a cohesive whole between these three elements: good, bad, and ugly. That's I think a lifelong statement that deserves to be timeless as far as like storytelling structure. I mean, every moment of this film just embodies everything I love about film the most. I mean, really, it really is one of the best films ever made. It really does sit right along with his upcoming, masterpieces I'll mention here too. But I say this is the best. They just do get a little deeper in the characters, but honestly, in a way, Leone is at his best when he's on full style, actually, because he is already a substantial director. Right? Like, it's the substance is already there. So it's like he doesn't even have to try too hard. I feel like to be substantial. That's a unique kind of way to be. Like Quentin Tarantino kind of has this special gift to him as well. It's just like it feels like effortlessly cool, and it's really hard to be effortlessly cool. I think because it's like it's so easy to seem like such a tryhard, but these guys just know how to do it right. This is a film particularly that just feels cool. And it's really in the best way possible. It's the best like rock and roll can make you feel. It's just great characters. You want to quote it. There's about thousands of quotable lines, honestly. It's about $1 billion worthy screenplay. It's one of maybe the greatest written films of all time. And it embraces like corniness. It's kind of goofy and ridiculous too. Like it's kind of over the top. And just hey man, just talking about taking you watch it. So it's a perfect film. Absolutely perfect, marvelous. One of the best celebrations of cinema of all time. Maybe one of the greatest pieces of just 60s art of all time. Maybe the best. Yeah, right up there with Space Odyssey. It's maybe the best. So yeah, it's perfect. Then we got 1968. 2 years later, he made Once Upon a Time in the West. And man, now we're getting a little more into substantial territory. I mean, this is an equally perfect film as far as its scope, as far as its story, but this is taking it a little more serious. So this is not, and this is actually equally perfect, but it's just a different shade of Leone that's equally great and important, I feel like, because it has like a deeper emotional depth that almost feels like it's more mature than Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But really, I think that like I still gotta take it good just by like one piece of hit, because I mean, I think it's just the feeling of that is too perfect, and the influence it has is too perfect. But I feel like this one just has such a great depth of character, and I feel like just the massive scope of it just really shows me just kind of like what it is to be like intimacy with a massive scope. And this kind of portrays that so perfectly that I just feel so naturally drawn to every moment of it. It just hits like by nature what I'm looking for in a film. Like just by way of the characters and the way they represent persuasion. I mean, oh, it's so incredible. But then you literally also kind of have a lot of like it feels like a lot more of a loose kind of architect. Like, I don't feel like there's anything as deep in a morality sense of like good, a force of good, a force of bad, a force of ugly. But it is kind of an epic exploration of just all kinds of characters. Most of them are more on the rotten side, I would say. There's a few forces of good in here, hovering as well. But ultimately, it's kind of like a I would say what might make this more like substantial is that it's also like a deconstruction of the Western genre, like taking down a lot of Western mythology and kind of like reading through it and seeing kind of like maybe like a fraudery within the foundation of some sort. And it's kind of doing it in a really interesting kind of way, or just really trying to break some rules. It's a modern, which I think is the perfect foundation for just modern storytelling, which you saw in cinema in the '70s and come. But yeah, the last thing, Leone feels like he came straight out of the '70s. Like I think he's a pure foreshadow of 1970s filmmaking. I mean, oh, his characters are so perfect. And I feel like Henry Fonda in particular, that's one of the greatest casting of all time. Like it's up there with like Albert Brooks Drive, where you just kind of see this guy who you naturally really like. You love Henry Fonda, like films like 12 Minutes. Oh, I love the film he's in. He's a charming, wonderful, like just pure man. But in this film, he's pure evil, and it's so twisted and crazy to see such a man you typically love go full crazy and evil. So this is what a pure portrayal of that is by way of the character trait. There's something about that name being attached to evil Jesus between this and Dennis Hopper and Blue Velvet. That's yay. And you got like he's just kind of he's just basically it's just kind of a story of Henry Fonda just stirring it up in this town in the worst way possible, kind of just causing hell and chaos for everyone involved in this mad situation. But the characters kind of find their moments, and a lot of melancholy leads up to this film too. I think that's what makes it all really great. Of course, a woman comes into town, and there's like a little bit like a triangle thing going on, so there's all this stuff going on as well. But it's not romantic whatsoever. It's just all purely a nihilistic outlook. The most masculine way. The Leone, I think even Thomas Martin Scorsese, perhaps like the most, I guess, just like purely masculine director. I mean, these films are wildly masculine. I've kind of come to see that in time. But this is a film that really does get into the nature of death in a lot of ways too. It explores how death impacts in a very emotional kind of way, actually, because the soundtrack makes it very emotional. And again, this is Ennio Morricone. Like in a sense, this is equally great to what the work did. He's in kind of more subtle territory, but it's equally perfect because now we're just in more melancholic depths. And also, it's even uplifting at times, celebrating the foundation of the West and genuinely seeing how they will live on timelessly. But perhaps the downfall will just always kind of also be there to haunt in a lot of ways. And this is a film that's just really trying to romanticize a lot of the cowboy ideal while he's taking down the mythology behind it and just getting to the heart and raw core. That's what he wanted. That's what a lot of the Westerns, I think, have. This kind of literally, I think Sergio Leone just kind of broke everything about Westerns in his own way. That's so good and effortless that I feel like he just kind of breaks these and kind of just gets to the core humanity spirit of it. Break through all those like kind of like just like societal foundations. Just get to the core of just what a person is. Who is this person? He just like wants to get right to it. And it's just all kinds of like romanticization and tragedy balanced magically here. I love the character Jill. She's incredible, and I feel like again the impact she has on this character is truly like fantastic and subtle. I feel like the entire way through her, she kind of has like an ability to like be manipulative in a way that makes sense. It's really fascinating how this is all played out. I feel like all this just kind of shows me that Leone really had a gift of portraying a woman like this in a really wonderful way. Like he didn't really show that too much in Get That the Other. This is like perhaps the most this is definitely the most, I would say, pro-feminine certainly he's ever been in a film. I think that's another thing that makes this film truly special. But oh my god, I can't get over the soundtrack. It's actually perfect. Again, it's a little more eccentric than Get That the Ugly, I would even say, but it's also more tender and sweet, which is just a really special whole, I think, to have for a film like this. So it's certainly one of his best films. It might be his best made film in a sense, because the way it takes down the Western, I feel like it foreshadows perfectly films like Robert Altman, particularly. I think of him a lot with this film. McCabe and Mrs. Miller, particularly. Like, that's an even further deconstruction of the Western, which I love equally, maybe even a little more than this in the end, because that movie is so freaking perfect. Well, so many Robert Altman films in the 70s feel like this kind of foundation being laid out in a lot of ways. Like, kind of deconstruction of, like, mythology. You kind of see a myth in the person, but then you see that it's ridiculous too when you look behind it. And this film kind of starts laying out that foundation. I think Leone films in the '60s generally kind of laid out that foundation in a really great way. So now we get to, I didn't see Ducky Sucker. That's the one film made in the 70s. I'll see it eventually. For some reason, I think it doesn't have any, like, the big actors in it, so I haven't been too motivated on that as much, but I will eventually. Well, in 1984, we have, in the 80s, like, this is like a big epic. He spent his entire life striving for Once Upon a Time in America. Yeah, this is one of those films I wrestle sometimes because, yes, it is overlong. It is a little bit over the top. But I think in the end, it really does capture something that's very raw and beautiful. And I will ultimately consider this a perfect masterpiece, just in the same leagues as the films in the 60s. But yeah, I feel like this is different because now we have the ultimate takedown of the Western genre in the 60s. That was Leone's thing. I feel like that was almost like his childlike wonder. Now we're kind of in adult territory. Now he's crying. I think he straight up took it because he was originally cast to direct the Godfather. His consideration to direct the Godfather Part 2, but yeah, I mean Coppola ended up taking over, of course, and his power he built up generated from the first Godfather. So Leone ended up kind of just making his own take on that, basically. So this is his take on it. It's a lot more emotional actually than Coppola. Coppola's emotional different. It's just a different balance of emotional. I think Leone was getting more to almost a childlike wonder, while Godfather and Coppola was a little bit more just like it's very adult romanticization, you could say, by comparison. But this is Leone, and I just love how this is like a completely different kind of film. I mean, it's just harsh and dark all throughout. I can definitely understand why this doesn't click as well as for a lot of people like stuff like Godfather or even Scarface, because I think this is just a film that really takes its time. I mean, it's drawn out as can be. And yes, I used to have moments where I feel like sometimes it overdrags, but now I kind of see all this as just, okay, this is like a really deep, epic character study. Now Leone is literally the most mature he's ever been with this film. And really just taking in a lot of, like, loss of innocence. I think that's what he really wants to live and breathe. Loss of innocence by establishing all these landscapes of just accompanied with some of the greatest music I've ever heard, honestly. Like, all these takes are just epic. And it's long. It's 4 hours. Another film reminds me a lot of Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, but this kind of balances Childlike Sense of Wonder, so I actually prefer this slightly. I dig Childlike Wonder balanced with just the loss of innocence. Complete loss of innocence is just perfect. And it's just perfectly made, I think. I mean, it's not a perfect. I mean, of course, you could argue there's, like, over drawn out moments, but I think whenever I really love a film, I'll say it can't be too long. And I retain that attitude, and this actually does land something perfect in a way where, even if it's not perfect, I'm just so fascinated by what's been established that I am holding on to, savoring every little moment. It may not seem necessary, but I feel like it does contribute to a cohesive whole that is all the more powerful and impactful, timeless because it was done. And this is just one of those films that, like, once those 4 hours are over, I just feel like I went through the most beautifully epic films ever made. Like, and I mean, the soundtrack really complements this in a way where it just kind of gets to the heart of these characters. You have Noodles. It's the ultimate he has the ultimate, most tragic man I've ever seen in a film. Holy man. The depths he falls into are literally the worst ever for a man. This literally captures, like, horrible, horrible actions happening. Getting into trouble at a young age and literally never getting, like, any kind of joy in his life. This is a very depressing man. And that's what makes this very emotional. You're in the life of a very depressed man who completely lost his innocence, like, by way of his, a lot of this kind of comes with just, like, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, a lot of it. But then it actually became an evil man, as this progressed. It literally does the most horrible thing imaginable a man can possibly do. So this is just very human and realistic, but it's very epic at the same time. I mean, this is as epic as the first two fiction films, and now we're just in crime territory, so I think it just almost feels like you're watching, like, a Martin Scorsese epic, where it's a little more like, it's still very Leone and slow-paced, but there's a little bit more of a hyper buzz just because of the characters. I mean, you literally have Robert De Niro playing Noodles. I mean, that's really fascinating, and it certainly is one of his best roles. Is, like, again, like, Raging Bull, like, man, that man was beat himself up. Because this is, like, a horrible man right here. Like, this is one of those films. I would say, like, I still prefer the first two Godfather films slightly, but this is an equally perfect film, I believe. What it captures is just loss of innocence. Things aren't the same anymore, once you're at a certain age. But yeah, hey, it's one of the greatest films I've ever seen in my life. Sergio Leone's one of the best of all time. Highly recommend it.